You are now tuned into the Rate Limited podcast with your hosts, Ray Fernando, Adam Larson, and Eric Bromshay. We are AI practitioners in this field with combined over 30 years experience, and we got a lot of releases that have happened this past week. So much that I'm just going to kick it straight into Eric and we're just going to go right into it here. How's it going,
Yeah,
Eric? How's it going,
I'm
Adam?
great. Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, it's been a crazy week. Last week we got Opus 4.6 and Codex 5.3, and that happened within a 15-minute window, which is unprecedented. And honestly, I'm someone who's sitting here waiting for these releases, day after day, and I'm kind of overwhelmed, to be honest. And I think a lot of people are starting to feel the same. Like, these models just come out. You have to change models like you change toilet paper. It's just insane at this point. So let's start this off. Opus 4.6 came out, and there's a lot of stuff that came around with it. I know, Adam, you're a huge Opus buff, and I want to hear what you're thinking about it.
Yeah, honestly, Opus 4.5, loved it. And 4.6 is just more of the same. I've done a bunch of, I would say, really high quality code with Opus 4.6, and been using it in Claude Code and in Cursor, and both of them perform really well. I will say, if I were to blindly have to test Opus 4.5 and 4.6, probably hard to tell the difference, honestly. And even like just running some light benchmarks on it, I'd say margin of error differences between them. But the one thing that I really think is interesting is, what are they calling it? The adaptive thinking,
Mm-hmm.
to where it decides how much reasoning to do. I've actually found that to speed up. It feels faster now because it will decide to reason, and it seems to decide that really like at the right time. So it puts extra effort into the things that it deems to be complex. And if I'm just changing like something minor, it speeds that up, which ultimately means less cost. So I don't know. That's where I stand on it. To me, it's the best coding model right now on the market, in my personal opinion.
Interesting, interesting. How about you, Ray? Are you with the same opinion there that it's the best coding model?
Uh, I go back and forth, to be honest, and I like it a lot for planning. And for transparency's sake, I have a bunch of research credits from Cursor. So I've been able to burn tons of GPU no matter what models. And so I've been focusing a lot mostly on the Cursor highness. And it's been really interesting because they have their harness that can, I really don't know where the border is if it's just spending less time in certain areas or just moving really fast to me. Where I find it very useful is like in planning still. And then I also find that 4.6 tends to be, how do you say it? Like it sometimes goes into a trajectory and goes deeper and kind of keeps digging itself deeper. And it really gives me like the back in like Opus 3.7 vibes or something, where they made this like leap where it would just be ultra steered in any direction that you send it down. So it wasn't an always thing, and that's what I really couldn't figure out there, whether it's the harness getting in the way, whether it's me. But I did notice like a minor model behavior change, where it was like too eager to go down a path, and so I had to kind of suck it back out. Um, and so I've been kind of playing around with that. I feel like um, it's been phenomenal for researching. So 4.6, I hook it up to Xcode. It's like my favorite tool for searching, and as an
Mm-hmm.
MCP tool call. And so what I do is actually I set these parallel agent calls to go do research. That has been like a huge, it's like having Google, like a better Google in a lot of ways. Like what I think what I like is the chain of thought reasoning down that whole path. And
Mm-hmm.
so like I'm basically participating in a robotics hackathon with NVIDIA, and it's like gathering this research that would normally take me lots of chats and different times. It's now like, launching these smart like couple of parallel tool calls, gets information back, thinks about it some more, and then like it's asking its own questions intelligently and then going down. And as a search tool, I want this as a search tool,
Yeah.
to be honest. And so there's a lot of stuff that I'm not familiar with, like Blackwell and GPU programming and things that I really don't know about, but it's helping me gather that context and also explain it simply. That I didn't find as well compared to Codex 5.3 for search specific tasks. So as a general model, but still inside my code base, I found it very, very helpful in that
So
sense.
I'm curious, Ray, are you using the 1 million token context window via Cursor, or are you on the 200K?
Yeah, but when I come back with those tasks, it doesn't use more than 150,000 tokens
Mm-hmm.
because each parallel call is like has its own window at that
Mm-hmm.
point. So it just comes back and feeds back information. And then I can go back because each parallel call has its own little thing you can click into and it shows the actual research that it did there too. Sometimes it'll just write a file into the actual file system for reference later on, which is cool. Or sometimes we'll just send the context back to the main model, depending on what was researched. So yeah.
So I think it's important to get into I think the why of 4.6. And I think you touched on it a bit, Ray, with your like delegating work. And I think Anthropic is really pushing this new mode of this kind of manager model with a bunch of subordinates, and that's kind of dived into their Claude Code Teams form. So if you're not familiar, Claude Code Teams, what it can do, and this is like a little bit of an advanced user setup where if you have a TMUX, and a TMUX is a terminal multiplexer, you can have multiple kind of terminals open, and Claude Code Teams leverages that by having your main Claude Code kind of set up, and it will spin up multiple Claude Codes in parallel, and they will kind of work on different tasks at the same time. So the main model kind of splits up the work and then gives that to the subordinate models, and they can kind of communicate with each other, sort of like a chat room style, and coordinate work and isolate like who gets to touch what files. So I think this kind of overseer mode is something that is kind of being leaned into more. And I think Opus 4.6 was trained explicitly to be a manager of other models. And I think more and more we're going to see this kind of swarm-like behavior that we've seen a little bit introduced in the past few months with stuff like Gastown and just different tools that kind of trying to lead into this. So it's an interesting kind of change of how people need to work with these models. And I'm not sure if like for all kinds of work requires it, but I do think like with limited context windows, people need to kind of be a little bit more creative on how to split up work, and it's an interesting kind of approach there. But I'm kind of curious, like, are either of you, Adam, have you like thought a little bit more about how to deal with swarms in your work, or you're kind of still like more serial kind of task style working with these things?
Yeah, I'm definitely more task by task, but I will say, um, I okay. So last time that we did this podcast, we were
Mm-hmm.
talked a lot about Multibot and kind of the whole like personal assistant, and then thinking a little bit more about swarms, and I think there is something there. I
Mm-hmm.
think the challenge is code the right application for this? And I'm not
Mm-hmm.
exactly sure it is. I think it's probably going to be better suited in other domains, at least for the foreseeable
Yeah.
future from my end. And I know we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but I don't think there's a lot of benefit to unleashing like a swarm against like a coding problem.
Yeah.
But I will say I had this idea. I would love to actually experiment around with this as like a POC, but not like a production sort of application. But imagine like a self-sustaining code base where literally you just have agents that are constantly committing to it, and they've got an overall orchestrator. And then what happens after a year of running that? Like, what can
Yeah.
that code base be? Like, are they like that? To me is fascinating. Like, is
Yeah.
is there actually a viability for that? Could that actually deliver something that's even feasible? I'm skeptical, but it would be a fun experiment to see.
Well, I think like this comes in to a little bit on this idea of verification loops. And I think right now the main bottleneck with this idea is that there are places where AI is a little bit blind to what the code is doing in production. And if you don't have like a really tight loop where the agent can, with good taste and judgment, determine that the code is doing what it's supposed to do, and what that's supposed to do feels good to use, because a lot of software is largely for humans. I mean, that's changing a little bit right now, but if the human is the intended recipient of the software, like you need to check that it works well, like click the buttons, make sure the flows all work, verify that like the app is doing what it's intended to do. And I think this comes down to like both like building the automation pipelines for like clicking buttons, but also making sure that if you're building a spec for what the app should do, that you're really thinking through the nuances. And I think the problem right now with a lot of people building with this stuff is that they're like, oh, I'm gonna vibe code a plan, I'm going to vibe up a plan, and they're not going to read through the whole plan. And then they have all these requirements that are there. And then the AI is implementing all the requirements. Some of them don't make sense. And so we're building software that actually doesn't even make sense. So you get weird slop at the end. So it's an issue right now with trying to manage so many AIs. It's like, what are you asking them to do? It's a big issue.
Yeah, and to add on to that a little bit, I was having this conversation with someone, and they were watching. This is someone that's, I would say, lightly technical. Not really an engineer, but could kind of code their way around a little bit. And he was saying, he said, how come we can't move as fast as what you see on YouTube, where these people are like coding full applications? And the bottleneck, honestly, is someone has to do the work to decide if it actually is a good idea to build the application. Does it actually solve the problem a customer actually wants?
Yeah.
You need to get that feedback in there. Then there's just, if I'm vibe coding something and I have none of the constraints around, meeting some product market fit or like building to the right, like, of course you can go a lot faster, but there's just a lot more to building software than just blindly, coding something. And to your point, I think that's largely where AI is good at. If you can guide it and you can give it the right directions and you understand, if you have a vision for what you're going to build and you understand how our problem should be solved, like you should just go be doing that with AI right now. Because that is the most challenging part, is figuring out what to build and how to solve the problem. And AI can't do that for you, in my opinion. It's not going to solve that part for you.
Yeah. So I think that also brings us to the idea of like kind of delegating work and being involved in the creation and shaping the software. If you're like iterating on something, you want like the quick iteration time. So you have to think about like, what the model's doing, but also like your build times, like how long is it taking to build and test and run the app that you're working on to make sure that, you're able to stay in the flow faster. And on that note, like another thing that they released with Opus 4.6 over the last weekend, actually, I think it was on Saturday they released it, if I'm not mistaken, is Opus Fast Mode. So this was a little funny, and I mean I had some thoughts on this thing because it's so expensive. It's 6 times the price of Opus, which is already the most expensive coding model. So Opus is already like I think like 4x the price per token of Codex models, and then you have Fast Mode, which is 6x the price of that. So you're getting to like 12x the price of like a normal, or you're just getting to insane pricing. And oh yeah, and it's actually, sorry, the 12x it's 12x the price of Opus normally if you're over the 200k token context window. So if you're trying to get into 1 million token territory, you're just bleeding through the nose. And there was something that's a little funny about this that because I read this funny Reddit post about this, and there's a lot of jokes being thrown around this model release because it's really expensive. But the thing is, like, because it's running on its own GPU cluster and stuff, cache is a little bit weird. So if you're not familiar with cache, like when you're coding with a coding agent, it's a workflow where you're adding to a log, and then all the previous stuff kind of gets back submitted, so you don't pay the same price for all the previous stuff. But then if you're switching mid-chat from like normal Opus to Opus Fast Mode, say you're like deep in the context when you're like, oh, no, I just got to finish this up quick. You're actually repaying the entire cache price for all those previous tokens at the high-end fast price to kind of keep going, which is really just so expensive. So you've paid these tokens once already, and you're paying them again if you switch to fast mode. It's kind of insane. So fast mode, I want to know, have you guys played with it? Adam, I think you told me a little earlier you played with it a bit. Well, what are the scenarios where you're finding it useful?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm a huge fan of Composer specifically because it's fast. And there are situations where I'm on a phone call and I need something fast to like show an idea or kind of prove something out. So I was doing a demo with the team, and about 5 minutes before, I was like, "Oh, I'm just gonna prototype something up really quick." Composer is normally what I would turn to. I'm like, let's just try Opus 4.6 fast mode. Yes, very expensive, but honestly, I mean, I think there are times that you just need to get stuff fast, because the value that you're getting from being able to show something, if I'd have been smarter, I would have thought about it an hour earlier and not have done it so last minute and saved a ton of money. But I do think there's value for these fast models, especially when you need to iterate. We've all been in situations where it's late at night, there's a bug that you're trying to work through, and it's just like, at that point, you don't even care about the cost, right? You just want to get the thing done as quickly as possible. So I'm going to turn it on at that point. Like, those are the things that I start thinking about. There's points where time starts to become like more valuable to me than spending 12x, what the base cost is.
I mean, I saw some posts saying that they had someone who switched to fast mode on their team, and it's now exceeding the payroll for that employee just in model costs, which is kind of insane to
That
think
person
about.
might be using it a little bit too much. I'd say like
Yeah.
98% of the time, you should probably just be using the regular models.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
you know,
according to the fast mode pricing, it's if you have over 200,000 input tokens, now for fast mode, you're going to be paying $60 per million token, and output is $225. So once you reach that 200,000
If you fill
token
that token
threshold,
window, oh man, insane pricing,
yeah,
insane.
98 to 99% of your time, you should be on a regular model. But you know,
Yeah,
every once in a while,
yeah.
there's a
You gotta
good use
treat
case for it.
yourself.
Yeah.
when
Oh
I'm rich,
boy.
there will be signs, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And how about you, Ray? Have you been switching to the fast mode with your unlimited research credits?
I have, and it's been stupid.
Well, it's Cursor's bill, right?
it's absurdly fast. Yeah, a big shout out to the Cursor team for letting me burn those credits and
Yeah.
try it on stream. So I've tried it for like planning modes. I've tried it for writing code, and what I found was fascinating because I used it recently for a migration. I exported all my ChatGPT chats and also my Anthropic chats, and what I also found interesting is the model can write really good Python code to parse through unstructured data. And so this was an amazing use case for fast because you're just seeing spews of like Python code like flash in and out of my chats. And it's like grepping data and pulling stuff out like in this like it's like watching a cracked engineer work at 10x speed. I'm like, bro, this is phenomenal. And it understands the structure of data super quickly and it's just iterating super fast. And it like from there, it's like, oh, okay, now I know what to do with this data. I'm gonna structure it this way. I'm gonna pull out this memory. Da, da, da. I'm like, oh snap, this could have taken me like half an hour or something, you know? Like it just did it like in like a couple minutes.
It's
Because
crazy.
I'm trying to make sense of this data to export it and put it into my Claude bot and have like a whole agentic thing with embeddings and all that stuff. And you know, in one chat, maybe took less than it was 175,000 tokens for the whole thing. And you know, midstream, you're seeing these like you know Python C like one liner, not one liner, multi-line you know Bash commit lines to take a look at stuff. And I thought it was a really cool use case for that, just to see it fly by the speed. I mean, would I be paying for that normally? Probably not. I'd just go to the beach and just set it and forget it. You know, just be like come back and like take a look at that task. I think it gets me to question, and this maybe I don't know if we're gonna touch on it now or later, but how do you compete with labs who have infinite budget, right? Like the Anthropics of the world, the Cursors, I call them like tier one companies who have like pretty much are close to the metal, have unlimited spend and also fast access to these models. So they're going to make products at a speed that maybe competitors can't because they don't have that top tier access. So I just kind of wanted to check in with you guys. Like if,
Yeah.
I mean, you know, what does this create? Does it create more slop for us? Does it, you know, if these labs know what they're doing, they're using it to automate research. Because I think Codex was just used primarily for the first time to.
Well, we didn't really get into Codex. I want to get into
Okay.
that one too,
Oh,
and
yeah.
then we'll kind of talk a little bit about like you know what it's for. It is crazy. Like to your point, Codex 5.3 was the other big model that just released, and they made it a lot faster than the previous ones were. And so that's like two things. One is they said that they improved the inference capacities so that their inference stack is much more optimized, but also the model is more token efficient than previous models. So it actually, you know, uses less tokens to get things done. What I have found personally is that 5.3 on lower reasoning settings is not quite as effective as I think it used to be. Like, you know, this adaptive reasoning thing is something that you know Codex has been doing for a bit. You know, it's new to the Claude models, but for Codex, you know, it'll jump in and out and decide when to kind of think more. And Codex is a model that really needs to think for it to be its best self. And I'm finding with Medium, it's reasoning less. So for some tasks, it's just great, and it's like quite reasonably fast now. But for other tasks, like I find that like if I'm not setting it to high, it's just not checking its work in the way that it needs to. It's just not going in a loop in the way that it needs to. So it's a little bit more problematic for that. But it is a crazy powerful model, and it's the kind of model where you just kind of throw a problem at it, and if you give it the right tools to check its work, like run tests and verify that everything is good, it will just run and run and run and run and run until it's done. And I had several problems like that over the last week where I've been doing that, and I just watch it go, and it just cooks, and I come back and I'm like, damn. But I do see a lot of the time that it will, write, little hacks for itself, or write disposable tests that clutter your test suite. Or maybe they're testing something very niche that doesn't really need to be tested. Like, oh, you have like a little if check. Oh, let's write a test for that if check. And it's like, bro, like that's not really necessary. So it's like it's a work in progress, this kind of thing. But to your point, Ray, you're saying that the Codex team is using this model to build the next generation of these models. And this was the first one that was instrumental apparently in its own release, which is getting crazy. Like now we're getting, we were talking about models releases getting faster. We're at a point now where these model releases are improving the velocity of the next model release, and that recursive loop is what they say is part of the takeoff. So we're in a time now where things are just going to keep moving exponentially fast, and it's a little unnerving. I'm not going to lie. Like it's a crazy time. So before I keep yapping about this, I want to hear. So Adam, have you played with Codex 5.3, and what are you thinking about?
Yeah, I have. I mean, I would say I like the model. It's to me, it's very similar to 5.2. If you take the time to build like a really good like technical spec, or you give it a lot of directions on what you want to do, and you can just kind of let it run, I think it's fantastic. And actually, I'd probably say if I was working that way, I'd probably use that maybe over Opus. But if you want kind of like the co-pilot experience where you're kind of like hashing stuff out, you're going left, you're going right, Opus I feel like is a little bit better from that regard. It is faster. I do still struggle with it being slow. I don't know like the right way to kind of explain that, but it just feels slower than when I'm using Opus. And there is I don't think the 5.3 had a fast mode. Like some of I think 5.1 or 2 had like fast variants I could actually use.
It does. It's not a fast variant. What it is that there's a service tier. So you can actually go with like flex or priority. And if you go priority, you're paying 2x the cost for a priority queue. So you're faster in the queue. I don't think it's necessarily 2x faster, but you get your tokens faster.
You get yeah. Yeah, and I think there's some of that could maybe help. Overall, like we don't know at least I was it yesterday when I was digging into it? I don't know the pricing of what this is going to be from an API level. I don't know if that's been released yet or not.
Yeah, it's the same as 5.2.
Okay, cool.
I think it's like $1.75 for input and then $14 for output, which is
reasonable. Yeah, that's a very reasonable.
Yeah. Opus for comparison is $5 for input and then $25 for output on the base level. There is something to consider though. So with Claude models, you have to pay a supplement to the input tokens, 25% extra when you're writing to the cache.
For the cache.
And then you get a much bigger discount for reading from it. Whereas with OpenAI models, they don't charge you for the cache. You still get the same discount. So that's kind of nice. Like you pay that consistent input cost. Your input tokens are really cheap. But the thing is, like, the thing about a reasoning model is that it reasons, it outputs tokens, and you pay those high priced output tokens for each reasoning token. And then each of those reasoning tokens is an input token you have to pay for after. So you're kind of paying for this constantly, which is kind of insane. So
I also
that's,
struggle a little bit with like the adaptive reasoning of OpenAI models. Like I feel like, they have okay, you can put high, extra high, low, but I'll put it on low sometimes, and it will go into crazy reasoning mode based on, and it's like, I feel like there's a little bit of work that they need to do there because it's like I feel like they're doing adaptive, but they also are having you pick. Where I kind of like Opus's approach, where you just learn to prompt around it. You learn to kind of how to talk to it to make it do more thinking or less thinking, versus me telling it to do low reasoning, but it thinking it should do higher reasoning, and then it running a bunch of like extra reasoning. And to the fact, I actually was doing some tests where I was running the same exact prompt with GPT 5.2. And this was GPT 5.2 mini with low reasoning. And I'd run the same prompt, and I had a Postman thing set up. It would be like, okay, 15 seconds, 12 seconds, 55 seconds, 10 seconds, 8 seconds, 70 seconds. So it was like, it has trouble consistently picking when it should and shouldn't reason based on that. And you feel that with the coding side too, where I don't think I get that same type of behavior with Opus when I'm using it.
Yeah. I mean, I think one thing to note though, like I think the speed is something they're working on a lot.
Oh yeah.
But I do think one thing that is a big kudos to the OpenAI team for this is that 5.3 is the first like reasoning model they've released that feels steerable. Like if you use previous ones, if you're interjecting in the middle of a chat, like the model would just kind of stomp over your prompt and kind of keep going. But this one kind of it really integrates it and adjusts its course right away, which is really important. And I think if you're staying in the loop, like that's an important thing to have. I will say as well, like the kind of task sometimes where I set up for Codex, like it makes the model feel a bit like a Terminator. Like you just kind of set it in a direction, and it will like stomp through every obstacle, every wall in its way to kind of get things working. And it's kind of insane to see. Like I had it like set up some integrations, and it set up tests for itself. It ran all kinds of tests. It was just and at one point the app was crashing and it was stalling, and it was like seeing it, and it would kill the process, and it just kept adapting and relooping until it found the source and then fixed it and then kept going and solved it. And when I came back, the problem was solved. And I had tried the same thing with Opus, and Opus just kept looping and looping, and it never was able to do it. It kept compacting. It would read some logs, hit the compaction limit, start over, read the same thing, never solve the problem. And I think having a bit more of a buffer in the context window with Codex like gives it enough room to kind of figure that out. So that's like an important thing to consider as well. So that's cool. We got through these models. There's a lot of other stuff that just came out too. Like right as we started this recording, we just heard that GLM5 was released, and there's DeepSeek 4, which has 1 million tokens. We haven't tried these models yet, so we'll have to come back to them later, but I just want to acknowledge them. Another thing that came out right kind of, with our last recording was Kimi 2.5, and I think we just touched on a little bit. I think Kimi 2.5 was interesting with this model is that it's actually now the most popular model to drive, OpenClaw. OpenClaw is a new name, if you're not familiar, for the Claude bot and Moltbot that was there before it. So I think everyone here has now had the time to kind of really dive into an OpenClaw setup, and I want to hear from Ray, who's like kind of really diving into this. So what are you running with your OpenClaw? Like, what are you doing with it? Like, what model is powering it? Like, tell us, Ray.
Yeah, surprisingly, actually, it's still Opus now 4.6. I just set up my little Mac Mini here. I have this little guy on my desk, and I've kind of started to understand them more as like agents that would operate independently with like plugins is kind of like the mental model. And so I like my Mac Mini is now just going to act as the orchestrator, and that's going to have like the really smart model. And then I plan to have like I have one on AWS, and then I have a bunch of them that I spin off on exe.dev. And so those will just do coding tasks. So the orchestrator will just send off coding tasks, and they'll have their little environments to play on, and kind of keep like I call it like the shotgun radius really, really kind of small. And as far as OpenClaw for the types of stuff that I'm doing, right now, this personal one on the Mac Mini is just going to do like all my personal stuff. And I'm just going to have it in my local network, tail scale, and like, be as little like influence from the outside world as much as possible, other than in my local network. And then there's not going to have like a lot of skills installed on that type of thing. I'll reach out to other agents that have skills and be able to send information back and forth. And so I'm isolating concerns for like how I think of those things. And so, yeah, Opus 4.6 is driving that guy. I'm also basically getting a Mac Studio. I'm going to play around a lot with the local models because I do want to get like a Kimi 2.5, or if like GLM 5 comes out or whatever it does come out, I'll have local inference. This MacBook Pro has 128 gigs of RAM. And so I also have a DGX Spark. So I'll basically do, you can combine them together using this thing called Exo Labs. And so that'll basically allow you to do some decoding with the actual Spark device. That's 120 gigs of RAM there. And then you also have the other stuff for the other guys, like for holding the weights across the whole thing. So in a local network at my house, I'm in like a different use case, obviously, but I'm more interested in having stuff that can just be done locally eventually over the long term, whether it's local embeddings or doing processing or just even writing files and stuff.
So I have to ask Ray though, like the Mac Studio, because one of them is not enough to run Kimi. Have you considered getting something like a tiny box or like something like where you're getting like really like data center grade set up in your home? Like, I mean, at that point,
this is
like,
where this is kind of where I'm entering, because pricing is absolutely bonkers. Like to spec
Yeah.
out like a fully like memory everything, it's
Yeah.
like almost 8 to 10K on a PC.
That's it,
Like if
you
you
know?
yeah, and graphics cards are going up like literally by
Everything,
the
yeah.
week. It's
Yeah.
it's it's kind of saying like yeah. So yeah. And so I'm trying to think about, what are the things that we can do here, and I feel like this window is small, but I think the larger picture is here that there's an interesting thread that I'm pulling on here with OpenClaw and usability to, like get stuff done, and then I'm still a little more conservative. Like I haven't just given it full access to emails and calendars and everything like that. And I've created separate accounts, obviously. And I'm like, progressively sliding like information in to be processed and kind of treating them as individual units of work that can be disposed in their own little containers. And so there's not a lot of infrastructure for that really set up yet, but I think people are trying to build different things.
Oh yeah, it's moving fast. And what about you, Adam? Have you got set up with it? What are you doing with this Clawbot?
Yeah, I think what I'll do is I'll go through kind of like this little experiment I've been working on. But first, I just want to take a second to like KBK 2.5 from 2 weeks ago to today. They are now like the number one model on OpenRouter. Like it is
It's a crazy model.
insane.
Yeah.
It is insane, and kudos to that team for what
Mm-hmm.
they've done because, I mean the numbers don't lie. Like it's taken the number one spot for usage.
Mm-hmm.
It's also topping the charts on the programming side as well
Yep.
too, and just unbelievable. And it's not even that fast of a model. Like there's a lot of a lot of these are getting like 15 tokens per second. All the providers are all over the place for that, but people are still using it.
Oh well, for
So
Moonshot Direct, it's quite fast when I was testing it.
yeah, so that and this is through OpenRouter, so we don't have a lot of those stats for like who knows what's even the real numbers are for people that are hitting the Moonshot AI API directly.
Yeah.
But on the OpenClaw side, I had this idea. I'm like, you know what? I am going to pretend like I'm a business owner,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to go through and see what of that I could automate. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, I'm going to start a clothing brand. So I was like, I want you to go through and research what services could I use to actually manage my clothing brand. So it came back. I'm like, okay, cool. So then I set up an email for it,
Mm-hmm.
and it's its own private email. I'm like, okay, so now I want you to take and compose emails to each of these companies, and get a proposal based on the criteria that we come up with for launching this
Mm-hmm.
brand. So
Mm-hmm.
it teed up a bunch of emails that I could go in and approve, and I'm like, okay, that's interesting. Now, could you actually take and figure out what it would take to set up a shop? Like, what's the pricing we should do around it? So it's just that there's so much potential here for what you could actually do if you get the right connections in place and give it the right objectives, that I literally think there are going to be new companies that spawn off of the concept of this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, this isn't the end state of this thing,
Of course.
but there's a whole paradigm of like these types of verticalized systems to go and set up an e-commerce brand or to
Yeah.
go do some particular job. And I'm talking about manage everything from your marketing, your inventory management, your finances. Like there's a lot of that could be automated over time.
Yeah.
And then you're just the captain of the ship, kind of pointing it in the right direction. You're guiding it. I think it's awesome. And I also just think kudos to Kimmy K 2.5 because the Kimmy team, Moonshot team, I would have never guessed, 2 weeks ago that they would be the number one model right now.
Yeah.
And it's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I set up my own OpenClaw, and that's exactly the model I put in there. I mean, I wasn't going to pay hundreds of dollars a day for this thing, especially experimentally. I had mine set up on my Mac in a VM just to play around with it and see where we ended up. And Kimmy's a great model to talk to. I think for me, like just the gap between this vision of yours, Adam, and like where like reality hits the road of like setting this up is that like there's a lot of stuff that's still being figured out with this model. Like I think they just released an update for memory, but it's this thing called QMD, and that thing takes like a ton of resources to run an embedding model on your machine and do all this stuff. We're figuring out the right ways to go. The code base for OpenClaw is also kind of insane right now. Like it's just thousands of PRs a day. Like and like I don't know who's reading the code for all of it. It's very crazy. So that's very hard to keep track of. And I think it's kind of getting kind of ahead of itself on complexity. And I think we're going to need some simpler stuff. Like one thing I was personally noticing with it is you ask it, hey, can you set up a reminder to remind me this thing later? It has this thing for crons, and like a cron, if you're not familiar, is just like a regular recurring task. And so just the architecture of this thing, it's basically like a coding agent where you have the context window, your user messages go in, but then there's also these like heartbeats that come in. So the heartbeats kind of remind it periodically, like every 30 minutes, hey, check, is there work to do? If not, if yes, do some work and you can go back to sleep. And then there's the crons where there's like, hey, like on this point in time, do this work. And I think the issue with it right now is that, like, there's like racing things that come in. Every message kind of spawns a thread. There's like all this stuff, and it gets very chaotic. If you're like spam messaging it, like the messages just kind of flood in, and then each message gets a response, and the whole setup is a bit confusing. And I found for myself, I needed to start building tooling around, just intermediating what the model is doing with my work and what I'm asking it to do. And I think there's a lot to build around this kind of flow of this kind of model interaction, and the paradigms of coding agents don't apply quite directly, and these little hacks kind of help but are not the final picture, I think. So there's something to build there, and it's an interesting space for sure. And I'm definitely interested in building on this because it's very useful. Like, to your point, Adam, like there's definitely the future here, but just for personal help, it's great. I just do worry as well at the same time that, like, if these AIs are sending emails, email is just no longer a viable medium for anything because you're just gonna get spammed. If every business starts doing this, like, man, like these cold emails are gonna go off the charts. It's just like AI spam is just gonna hit unprecedented levels. So yeah, I mean, I'm curious, how are you guys feeling about this, like, death of, like, human interaction too? Like, is the future just AIs talking to each other? Like, is that where we're at now? Like, no one talks to each other, their AIs just coordinate? Like, I don't know, man. How about you? What are you thinking, Ray? Is
I
that
was
where you're
thinking,
at? Yeah.
I heard this term, like when you're watching movies and stuff, they say, oh, your people will talk to my people. So like
Yeah,
now
yeah,
we
yeah.
actually have that as everyday things. Like my agents will talk to your agents and we'll figure out a good time
Yeah.
to, meet up or something. It's like, yeah, I think one, I agree. I feel like we're in the early innings of this stuff. It's a big playground for, us to experiment. And the one line setup, for most people is like everyday people isn't really there yet. And we're lucky as developers, like most of our machines are kind of already configured to do this one line setup. And so, because I've been, all of my other friends have been saying, like, can you help me? I can't install Git, or I can't, homebrew. What's that? Like, it's like, oh yeah, that's right. So yeah, I do think, yeah, the playground capability is really cool. I like this idea, but the stuff that it does introduce, I think, will get us to think about. I mean, that's what happened back in the day with email, right? That's why there's like these trusted, sending servers and all this stuff that, like, no longer, most people, if you send an email from like a Mac Mini that you spin up at your house, it's probably not going to land in your inbox anymore. And I think that's probably what we're going to have in this new age of
Well, the
assuming
crazy thing
everything's
with this
AI.
is that you can actually give your Clawbot Gmail access, and so you don't even get that trust layer of Gmail
That's what I
because,
did.
yeah,
That's what I
exactly.
did.
So very crazy. Like, you can't rely on anything now. Like, AIs are just using your computer. Like, whatever you can use, the AI can use. That's
Yeah,
where we're
I
at.
didn't give it any of my actual emails. Like I made it its
Yeah.
own email for it. But yeah. To your point on this, Eric, I think it's valid. Like today, I was thinking about what do I want. All of you have probably talked to Siri or Google Home or something, and you're like, oh, this thing's a piece of garbage because like it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't do what I want it to do in some
Mm-hmm.
way, like some stupid limitation. What I really want is like an executive assistant that when I tell it, hey, I want you to go arrange something with Eric and Ray, let's coordinate calendars. I want it to take care of that and have that on my calendar, so I don't have to deal with the coordination of that, but I still
Yeah.
get to go hang out with you guys. Like
Yeah.
that's my dream state. Like, hey, let's go
Mm-hmm.
book a dinner, find a good restaurant, get the time, get the reservation set up. Invite the people to come that want to come. Like that's the goal I want to get to,
Mm-hmm.
or go through all my emails, tell me which ones I need to respond to,
Yeah.
or direct the ones where they need to go. Like if we can get to that state, and there's like I could have my own executive assistant AI bot, like that would be amazing.
Yeah.
And I still think the human interaction is important. But I do think there's a lot of things that we probably could automate with agent to agent communication. But there's still going to have to be we're going to have to hang out. You know, still going to have to be that human in the loop across the board for a lot of this stuff.
Yeah. I think like what's missing is like kind of a permissions layer where like you get escalated notifications on your phone, for instance, to say like, yes, I want the AI to be allowed to do this action and deny that action. Like anything that's critical, like sending an email or deleting an email, like that kind of stuff. Like maybe you want it to be able to do certain things in batches. But also to the point of agent communication, there's another big risk vector that comes in now is called prompt injection. And when you're running models like Communicate 2.5 on your machine, maybe you're running a quantized version. There's a big risk where the model is very sensitive to what you tell it, and it's a big problem right now where if people are sending messages to your agent that you're not vetting, like, and it has controls in the keys to your kingdom, who's it going to give the keys to? Maybe it's easy to impersonate you. Maybe like it gets confused on who's actually messaging it. Like there's a lot of risk vectors here. And with people adding all these tools and skills, we saw like security researchers are embedding all kinds of stuff in skills. Like a skill is just like, here, like run do this procedure, install this script or whatever, and the model's just going to do it, and all of a sudden it installed malware, it exfiltrated all your keys, and it didn't realize that it did it. It was just following instructions. There's so many risks around this stuff right now, and it's very crazy, but very cool to build in it. Like it's, if you know what you're
Super
doing,
cool.
like it's very magical to see an AI that like has an identity, that wants to take charge and be helpful to you and like update itself and improve and build itself tools. Like it's a very cool paradigm. It's just
Yeah.
very scary at the same time.
Yeah, I think it's like we need to acknowledge all the risks that are there.
Mhm.
I think we did that in the last episode pretty well.
Yeah.
But we also, I like the way you put it, Eric, where it's like, I forget your exact words, but it's basically like we need to find something useful for it to do.
Yeah.
And if we could figure out what those useful things are and then put the guardrails around that, knowing
Mhm.
that there's still going to be some holes that they are there, but
Mhm.
like we shouldn't stop building out of fear. And I think partially I was kind of probably leaning more towards the I'm scared to kind of mess with this in the last episode, but now I'm like, you know what? I need to not be scared. I need to just
Yeah.
put the right guardrails around and like
Yeah.
see what this is about.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're all in a position right now where we could probably be building our own systems to do this. And I don't think all of these systems need to have a bash tool. I don't think all of these systems need to be able to kind of have root access to your computer. You can do a lot, with just an agent loop. Like if you use the Claude Code SDK, for instance, like you can just control what tools it has. You can probably build a minimal version of this really quickly, and just control what it has access to. And I think that's like where I think a lot of folks should probably land is, yes, this thing is crazy. It's going viral. It's got a lot of stuff, but like, you probably don't need everything it's doing, and it's probably good to learn what goes into the code that's running on your machine that you're giving so many permissions to, especially if you're a developer who wants to experiment. And it's I think the age of personal agents is here, and that involves like personalizing what the agent is and what it does, and I think that's an important space to be looking into. Any
Totally
closing
agree.
thoughts on this, Ray? With your crazy setup, are you investing thousands of dollars now in running these models?
Well, I'm just using a subscription, so I think that kind of works out well. And I was at the first ever SF ClawCon, so they actually
Oh
had
yeah,
Pete Steinberger show up, and I had a little live
very
stream
nice.
and got to chat with him briefly. And I mean, there was a whole packed room. Just kind of my experience was like 1,000 people packed in
Yeah.
this like in total San Francisco vibe. So it was
Yeah.
the Super Bowl for ClawCon in San Francisco. It was just kind of insane. And
Yeah.
so I think there's something there. I think the vibes was just kind of more than I've ever seen ever before. The enthusiasm across the board, from robotics to other types of things that people are wanting to. And the soul file is an interesting concept. I think you talked about this in the last episode too. And I think that's what, for me, I resonate with a lot. And I feel like this is like personal computing, and I feel like we're seeing the paradigms a little bit of like, it made me think back to the Microsoft days of Steve Jobs versus Bill Gates, engineering focus versus Steve Jobs being like hey, like fonts and other cool stuff that are human like, that can bring that warmth in. So I think there's something here. I just kind of leave people on that note
Yeah.
to think about going forward. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate, like the experience of setting up, a Clawbot, like it's very cool where you open it up, it asks, "Who am I?" And like, what tell me about myself? Like, what am I doing for you? And you have to think about it, like, what do you want this agent to be? It's like a blank slate at the beginning, and you have to help it like form an identity. And I remember like I gave it a name. I was like, oh, I'm kind of feeling this name, and I was like, but that's coming from you. Like I want to come up with my own name, and the AI was pushing back and asking to have its own identity that it wanted to find. And I kind of gave it some direction, and it came up with something. I was like, perfect. Like there you are. And I think that's really cool. Like an AI that pushes back on kind of just being a shadow of you and wants to have its own identity. Like there's something weird about it. And it's still like, like the AIs are not like alive, but like they're getting to this place where like there's enough layers where it starts to feel like they are in a way, and it's kind of weird. It's a very weird space, and I think it's just gonna get weirder as the years go. So I think like we had a lot of stuff we wanted to talk about around code and what, but I think just to kind of put a pin on this whole idea there, I just want to touch on something that was passed around yesterday. And I think, a lot of you listening are probably feeling this as well, where, getting into the space of AI coding, you start to feel like you need to be more productive. Like the draw to like produce more is just unending. And, every new interaction, gets you kind of closer to some end goal, but there's never a final state. So the guy who made Gastown wrote this article that was passed around yesterday, and he called it AI Vampires. And I think it's a really apt way to think. And I think it's important to take a look and take a moment and acknowledge this, where like, people who are adopting AI, they're working at companies, they're doing more work than ever. They're spending, 10 hours a day now working on weekends, fixing issues, just coding. And they're just kind of stuck doing this, and they just feel like they have to, and they're doing this voluntarily. And it's great for the employers. You're seeing these productivity gains, but, a lot of folks are kind of burning themselves out quick. And I think like, all of you could probably speak to this, where you're kind of, working all the time with this stuff. Like it's very hard to put down, and it's very hard to stop and take a break. And I think it's important too. So what are you thinking about this, Adam? I know you read through the article as well, and I want to hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I see it with people that I work with. I see it in
Mhm.
myself where, like, just this morning, I woke up this morning and was coding something, and before I know it, like 3 hours have passed and I'm running late for something. So it's just
Yeah,
like it's almost kind of addicting to a certain point
it
because
is.
it's even hard. It's hard to explain unless you've kind of experienced it.
Mhm.
But I also go back to whenever I'm in this mode where I'm trying to manage 3 agents at the same time, and I've got like
Mhm.
tasks over here and I'm jumping between them. I feel very productive, and it's kind of like this super empowering, like magical feeling
Mhm.
that is also kind of addicting, but also
Yeah.
very exhausting.
Yeah.
So in that article, he talks a lot about the inevitability of kind of a shorter workday, and how we can
Mhm.
kind of, if we could figure out a way to harness our productivity to where we're able to work like I just described for 4 hours straight, but we're getting the productivity of an 8 hour day. Like honestly, we should figure out a way to kind of shift in that direction as a humanity, rather than doing that for 12 hours and and spending every waking minute, killing ourselves to try to move forward on this. So I think it's definitely a real challenge. I see it with my team. There's a person that I work with that the poor guy will like, he gets something in his head, and I love the ambition, and then you come to the next morning, you could tell that he was up all night like coding it
Mm.
because he couldn't put it down. And it's like, buddy, you gotta stop. You can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
And he's got like this entire thing already built out and kind of planned out and everything. Love it, love it, love it, love it. But it's like you can't do that forever. And I'm guilty of it. I know you're guilty of it, Eric, running a
Yeah.
company, because I've been in that boat as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And to Ray's point earlier, what's interesting too is that now there's like a wealth gap on like how much time this stuff is going to take from you. And if you're very wealthy, you can get a lot done in 3 hours. But if you're not, you're gonna have to wait for those tokens to come in, and it might take you 8 hours instead to get the same work done. And I think that's a bit unfortunate. Like we're getting into this point now where the accessibility of AI. We were promised like it would be too cheap to meter, but I feel like we're at this point now where like if you want your tokens smart, you're gonna pay for them. If you want them fast, you're gonna pay for it. So it's a tough time. Like fast tokens can be smart tokens, or they can be dumb tokens, like depending on what model you're using. And the old models are not getting cheaper, but there's new models that are cheaper. So it's a crazy time, and hopefully the balances shift a little bit. But it's a tricky space to navigate, and I'm curious if you have more to say on that, Ray.
I agree. I've learned that I have an addictive personality, and I didn't realize this until the agentic coding stuff, to be honest. And it's sort of what drove a lot of success in my career previously, is that I would just work even nonstop before AI, because I was just too addicted to learning about this gigantic system, that was being built. And so I think this is a really good line that I like about it, that Yegi calls out. It's like agentic software building is genuinely addictive. So the better you get at it, the more you actually want to use it. So it's simultaneously satisfying, frustrating and exhilarating. It doles
Mm-hmm.
out dopamine and adrenaline shots like you're on a fire sale. I
Yeah.
think that captured it perfectly because this is what I'm seeing again. And so when I'm using Opus 4.6 fast, I mean, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it right now. So like, that's what's crazy is that like that dopamine hit is insane because it makes me think, holy smokes, if I can get this stuff that fast, what else can I point this big bazooka thing at? And I feel like happens every couple of weeks. And it's a drug dealer effect. I saw this growing up. Like I know this,
Yeah.
I know this scheme. Like, but it's not that they're
Yeah.
doing it on purpose, but the activations are there. And I think one of the things that has been really weird is that like I purposely transported myself to a different place, like Hawaii. And there have been some days where I've stayed inside and it's a beautiful day and I'm literally looking at it and I'm like, I should be out there at the beach, like I should just be delegating this task to a cloud model and just come back and not care. So it's kind of trying to break that cycle, I guess, for me psychologically. It's like, okay, I'm in a different environment now. I'm just going to set this task for Codex or whatever. Even though it's slow, I'm just going to go outside for a walk now because, I forget. I've been on, for 3 hours and I should probably just stand up, that type of
Mm-hmm.
thing. So, yeah, I think addiction is real. I feel like we should talk about it more often. And I think I'm really glad that you guys brought this up. And I'm pretty sure other people may feel a similar way.
Yeah.
And to your point, Eric, that you're making before, I was thinking because you came from a company that was very much in this space, but it's almost become like in-app purchases. Like you pay to win now for a lot of this stuff. So you're like, oh, cool, yeah, you could use our free tier or our cheap tier, but you also could pay 12 times as much if you want to go faster and get more of that done. You know what I mean? So it's like
Yeah.
we've almost got to your point. I didn't think about it as a wealth gap, but you're totally right. Like we now have the ability for people to pay 10 or 12 times more to go and do more of that stuff faster.
Yeah.
Um, it is such an interesting world that we live in, and I don't see that changing. We're probably going to see it like leaning more and more into that as we go forward. But anyway, that just to kind of close my thoughts on that.
Yeah, and it's a crazy time, and like the promise of all these data center build outs is that you have more capacity, but now we're finding more to do. Like every time there's more capacity comes online, they're like, oh well, now we've got teams. Now you can run 18 clods at the same time and burn just way more tokens, and you're spending more money, and like none of it ever gets cheaper. You're just gonna spend more. It's just kind of the endless loop here. So I don't know. It's a weird time, and I think you gotta be vigilant to what's going on, but I think it's also important that like you need to do what Ray's saying, like go outside and just stop for a day, take breaks, because you're gonna burn yourself out. Like especially as the speed of this stuff coming out is increasing, like you just can't be on top of everything. Like no matter how hooked in you are, no matter how much you feel like you need to kind of be ahead of everyone else with this stuff, like you have to stop and take care of yourself because yeah, you're just gonna burn out and you're not gonna be able to keep going. So yeah, be careful. So I think it's probably a good place to end for today. Any closing thoughts, Ray, on this?
No, I think one of the things we could say, we're super thankful of all of our users. If you have a chance, definitely pop into Spotify, also on Apple Podcasts, and just give a 5-star rating. It actually does help boost the algorithm. Our goal is to actually be the #1 podcast in the world for the AI podcast. We started a meme earlier and people didn't really kind of get it, which is the first episode where Sonnet claimed themselves to be the #1 coding agent. So that was kind of where that came from. So if you see that in our previous episodes, we're basically, it's like insider knowledge. So if you've made it this far, you're one of our loyal fans, and definitely go pop on over and make it the 5-star contribution. So that way we rank #1 for AI podcasts.
That's great. And what about you, Adam? Any closing thoughts for today for the audience?
No, I mean, I would just echo everything that Ray said. This is such an amazing time to be coding. I wouldn't be afraid of any of this stuff. I would start trying to embrace it wherever you can, and just knowing that you got to have the right guardrails in place. Um, the one thing I got to thinking about a little bit is, when you first start coding, the addictive part of coding was seeing something visual on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
And every other day, I'm seeing these non-technical people come up and just like getting super excited about the
Mm-hmm.
stuff that they're able to build. But now it's like we're at this early adopter phase. I think over the next 5 years, we've got to get to the point where it's available to everyone. You don't have to be a power user to actually take advantage of this stuff. And I'm here for the ride. Like I'm excited to see kind of how we build this stuff such that it's secure, that my wife could actually use OpenClaw and actually do something and feel safe that, she's not going to get hacked by some, credit card scam. So that's what I'm here for.
That's crazy. Well, I hope we get there. But these models are, we didn't mention it earlier, but the Codex is high on cybersecurity threat. So you got to watch out what people are doing with these models. People are trying to break into your computer now. So the middle part of this whole ride is going to be weird. So be careful what you download, and be careful what scripts your models are running. But I think that's a good place to end for now. Thanks a lot for tuning in. Like Ray said, please subscribe. Make sure you tell your friends about it. And tell us what you think. What do you want us to talk about next week? Assuming there's not 18 more model releases that come out.
There will be. Within 15 minutes of each other.
Yeah.
Again.
Oh, geez. Yeah. Yeah. Right after this podcast airs, I've probably missed something already.
Yep.
So thanks a lot for everyone for tuning in, and wish you all the best. Thank you.
Take care, everybody.